halal, the gardens, yeah, and the mashallah. And these are all the nadra, seeing Allah. And for some, that's it. Once you see the face of Allah, we can't even possibly process that in this world. But it will be captivating in the next life. It's more than 10 times in the Quran, one of the ways that the people of Jannah are described, Ahl al-Jannah, the people who actually get it to the paradise, get into the gardens, their description is لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. They are people who have no fear and they have no sadness. Multiple times in the Quran this is described, that if you don't have any fear and you don't have any sadness, to say that in Jannah it has an absence of what we have here in the dunya. Here in the dunya, we experience fear and sadness all the time. This is our normal, so one of the ways to think about paradise is actually that fear and sadness is removed. And that's the garden. That is the garden. If you can find a way to remove that fear in your heart, remove that sadness in your heart in this world, then you have a piece of Jannah already here. Lahum jannatain. You can have a Jannah in this life and in the next life, because you have a piece of the garden simply because of your emotional state. So the reason is because this world is filled with things that can make us fearful and make us sad. And there's a famous qasida that is recited, Ala ya Allah bi nadhara. Oh Allah, can you just look down upon us, one glance, and with the eye of mercy, so that you could, clean and treat and heal my heart, all of the amrad that can come into my heart. وذي دنيا دنيا حوادثها كثيرة وعيشتها حقيرة ومدتها قصيرة. And this dunya is described, it's a short place. It doesn't last long. And it's filled with accidents and tribulations. And it's not a very fun life, usually. Not to say that you have moments of joy. Of course you have moments of joy and happiness in this world. But overall, when you look at it, there's a sort of melancholy. There's something, if you are aware about it. Now, some people are unaware. They stay in a state of ghafla and a state of heedlessness, and everything looks good to you until it suddenly crashes in front of you. And one of the things about our psychology is that if you have been experienced in tribulation and tests, and you've had something difficult in your life, actually that helps you, because you get more resilient with the other challenges you're going to have in your life. But if you've always been protected and safeguarded and in a bubble, then one day when you face something that's very difficult and a disappointment to you, you don't know what to do because you've never experienced it before. So this is something to consider, that we, as believers, we don't try to avoid these feelings and of the anxiety and the sadness. We ask Allah for refuge in that. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ would say that as his normal daily routine. Oh Allah, keep me away, or I seek refuge from huzn and hazan, from the idea that I want to ask Allah for refuge from that fear and that anxiety about the future and sadness about things in your past. So normally when you think about anxiety, al-qalaq, or khawf, it's about things in the future. You're usually worried about things in your life, and what will transpire in the future. So you're thinking about some other timeline. Or if you're depressed and sad, you're usually about thinking in the past. You're stuck in something in the past that is keeping you in this low, negative mood. And so your mind is stuck in a different, again, timeline. But when you're present in the moment, then you're not worried about the future or the past. You're in that moment. And that is the presence of the believer, where you're just witnessing the blessings of Allah all around you. It sounds like there's a lot of rain today, and then I'm hoping tonight the rain will subside. Although, of course, rain is an opening of rahmah, and opening the gates of the paradise. But my intention, inshallah, tomorrow after Fajr is I want to go to visit the grave of a very close friend of mine, Suhaib Sultan, who many of you know probably in this community. I haven't visited his grave yet, so I want to visit him. And of course, we believe that in your grave, that's another stage of your existence. And those who have died and buried, they have some awareness of it, because they can hear when people come or near the grave. And we say salams to the people in Ahl al-Qubur, the people of the graves. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, said, زوروا القبور إنها تذكركم في الدنيا وتزهدهم في الدنيا. That you should visit the graves because it will remind you of the akhirah. It will remind you of the next life, that this place is so temporary. And so if you visit regularly to the graves, you have that ongoing reminder that this world is, this is just a temporary place. There's the akhirah. It also makes you a little bit more like you have a sense of your what's the word? Asceticism. You kind of disconnect from the worldly world, the material world, and that's another good thing to do. You don't want to get caught up on the dunya. Our teachers would always tell us, it's fine if you have a lot of material things in this world, but just keep it in your heart, in your hand. Keep it in your hand. Don't keep it in your heart. Our scholars have never said anything bad about having wealth, having possessions, having a lot of pieces of the dunya. That's okay, but just keep it in your hand. Use it for, purposes, and ideally use it for good purposes with good intentions. Just don't let it enter your heart that this is something you're so connected to, you're so powerfully, worried about it, as if you should reserve those feelings for the akhirah. That's what you're really trying to tie your heart to. So, my plan is, inshallah, to visit him there, and I think these are beautiful reminders, and Imam Sohaib, he as one of the brothers was telling me, it's like he taught us how to die with nobility. And that is the state of a believer, that you put forth and you've submitted to Allah, and you allow all of your affairs to go to Allah. فَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I'm turning all of my affairs to you, Ya Allah. It's not an easy ask. It's not you quickly can do it. It requires ongoing work on your heart, and try to deny your nafs so that you can connect to these realities. And our teachers, have been teaching this for centuries, and this is the way. But it's not easy. It's easy to say it, but it's harder to actually implement it in your life. But the good thing is that we have an example. We have our beloved Prophet Muhammad and all of the righteous people that came after him, that following his teachings. And so this is something to consider about when we're looking at our identity of who we are as believers in this time, in this modern world, that we come from a legacy. We come, it was so beautiful to see the ijaza, gathering yesterday. It was so beautiful because we're celebrating the idea that students in our community are linked with a chain of transmission to all of our scholars, and ultimately to our Prophet Muhammad. And so having that link is so important, because that's where you can rely on things, where you don't have to feel you're the only one. You got to figure it out all by yourself. No, you have a whole legacy of history and righteous people that you can rely upon. And they've been sending their du'as down to us for generations. And so that we should take that as a comfort in our heart, that we've been so fortunate to be in such a tradition where you don't have to do this all alone. You have a knowledge that's being passed on generation to generation to generation. So to see that, in the community here it was so touching, and a beautiful tradition that we should try to keep, make sure that maintains in our communities. So there's a famous hadith many of you are aware of. It's well known. It's called the Hadith of Jibreel. And it's the famous hadith where we learn about the three principles, concepts in Islam of Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. And it was that what happened was that the angel Jibreel entered into Medina disguised as a stranger. The Sahabi said that when he entered the gathering, he entered into the masjid, and nobody had seen this man before. Later, the Prophet ﷺ tells the Sahaba, "This is Jibreel. He came to teach you about your deen." But he was unknown. He was unknown to the people. And it was very strange because he came in out of the desert in a completely white thobe, nothing dirty about him. You would think someone who was a traveler, unknown, he would have had some signs around him that he had just come from a long journey. This man just walked in fresh and sat down in front of the Prophet ﷺ and asked him about these questions. Tell me about Islam. Tell me about Iman. Tell me about Islam. Tell me about Ihsan. And the Sahaba, they loved this kind of stuff. They would say, we would love it whenever a random Bedouin would enter the gathering, and they would usually come up and they'd usually say something just so outrageous sometimes even borderline rude. But they got a random question, and so they asked the Prophet. And the Sahaba used to say, we used to love that because we were too shy to ask that, But this man just came off the street, no ceremony, nothing, like not trying to be arrogant. He was just speaking from his heart, in a rough way. And the Prophet ﷺ was so merciful. He's rahmatul alameen, so he welcomed them. And the Sahaba, they said, we used to love that because these guys would come with all kinds of questions and scenarios, And they were too shy. They were too close to him at that point, where they didn't feel that they could say that to the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anhu, he would say that, he had some private questions about husband and wife kind of questions, but he can't ask that to the Prophet ﷺ and Fatima as his daughter. To him it was too awkward. He would send other companions to maybe pose that question, so they could get an answer, because he just was too shy to do that. So in that hadith, we learn that we have the structure of our deen is that we have a theology. We start with our iman. What do we believe? What do we believe about Allah? What are the qualities? What are the things that are possible for Allah? And there are certain things that are impossible of Allah, meaning Allah would not do something like have a son or have something that would be human in his feature. We know that's impossible because Allah is unlike any created thing. He is the creator. So we have an aqidah, we have a theology, and then we have our fiqh, the Islam. We have all the rules of the behavior, how do we regulate how we act in this world. That's all the Sharia. That's the Islam part. And then we have a spiritual excellence, the ihsan, as if you can worship Allah as though you can see Him. And even if you can't see Him, then you know that He sees you. That this ability, this idea that you go beyond just the text. You go into the taste, the dhawq. Dhaqa, as the Prophet ﷺ says, that you will have a dhawq, that you will have a taste. Whoever is pleased with Allah as your Lord and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as your Prophet and the Islam as your deen, you start to taste it. You have something experiential. It's not about text. It's not about what it looks like. It's something you feel inside. I asked one of my teachers, Habib Hussein Sagaf, about, can you apply that to all things? And he said, yeah, like we have this concept in psychology. It's very common. It's the mind and the heart and the soul, and the body. Sorry. So like you have sort of an intellectual, you have part of things, you have a behavioral part of things, and then you have this third part, which is nonverbal. You can't explain it. It's something experientially that you just feel it inside. So you have the mind, the body, and the soul. The Islam, the Iman, the Islam, and the Ihsan. And that applies to everything in your life. So for Islam, we have a belief system. We have, and then we have, how do we pray? Well, that's the Islam part. How do we follow the fiqh and the Sharia? And then beyond that, what happens about the heart? And how do you remove arrogance from your heart? How do you remove that fear and that anxiety? How do you turn and have tawakkul upon Allah? That's the third part. That's ihsan. But you can apply it to literally everything in your life. If you are a cook, if you're a chef, you're going to have the same three parts. You're going to have first an intellectual part of it. You're going to have a recipe. You're going to look up what are the ingredients that I need to cook this meal. Then you're going to have the behavior. How do I actually cook it? What temperature? When do I mix things? When do I put, the different ingredients in? How long do I let it wait? How do I serve it? That's all the behavior. And then finally, when you eat that meal and you get the taste of it, you can't see that on the recipe. You can't find it in the cookbook. You can't find it on the video when the guy's demonstrating the recipe. Not until you ate it will you actually taste it. And then that goes to other things in your life. All of your work, anything you do in life, you can always look at this structure. Okay, I have an intellectual way to start. I have a behavioral way to do it. And then I have this third part. It's in my heart. It's in my feelings. It's not verbal. And if you apply that to all of the things in your life, you can then, maximize who you are. Whatever it is you want to do, whatever passion you have in life, it keeps applying every time. Your work, there's the same thing with career. There's going to be an intellectual part of it. You need to learn the skills and knowledge first. Then you got to implement it. And then you got to go to the ethics and the professionalism part of it to really embody this career, whatever you are thinking that you like. And you can literally apply this to everything. So for us as believers, when we're thinking about our identity, this is something that, if you don't do it with an intention, we kind of just float and we go through the flow. But if you have an intention, you can focus who you are and how you want to be. And ideally, if you do that, you're connected to the tradition, you're connected to the righteous people in our history, you're connected to our intellectual history, you're connected to our behaviors of our ummah, and you're connected to that taste, the experiential part of it. Ideally, even during Ramadan, that's what we're trying to focus. We're trying to hone all of these things. The fasting there's the intellectual part. I got to avoid certain things. I'm fasting. I need to know those rules. What are the things that will invalidate my fast? And then you got to implement it. You got to make sure that you're at the right time and watching the sun and these things, and making sure that it's realized. And then you have this other point where it's like, I'm not just fasting for food and drink. I'm fasting also from lower character. I'm trying to perfect my character. And so that's another level that it's not really verbal, it's something that you just experience. So I ask Allah to, allow us to be amongst those who are able to apply their iman and their Islam and their ihsan. So I wanted to just maybe open up a little bit and ask if anybody had any thoughts or questions, reflections. I'm very flexible, and Brother Pervez asked, if I could open it and make it a little bit more interactive. So I'm very willing to do that too. So maybe this is the time if you had any, question or comment or thing to reflect. Yes?
Do you have any advice for new Muslim converts who are trying to fast Ramadan for the first time and eat halal?
Good question. So do I have any advice for a new Muslim who's going into Ramadan and trying to make sure that things are halal? And I think it's very difficult, and we have to acknowledge that we have to have empathy. Ideally, they're part of a community, and the people in the community should reach out. If you know someone who's a new Muslim, try to be with them as much as you can during Ramadan, because it's probably disorienting. you know, I mean, just a very simple example is I remember there was a brother I knew in university, a Latino brother, and he converted to Islam. His first Ramadan, he didn't know, and it was an iftar, and there's a big dish of the majul dates. He doesn't even know what a date is. Everyone else does to take it for the iftar, so he takes his, and he just, pops it into his mouth and tries to swallow it. He doesn't know. And then there's a giant pit inside his, it got in his throat, and he didn't know what was happening. He was going to choke, and he had to get it out. And I'm just saying that it's kind of in retrospect, of course, he was laughing later, but in the moment, it was pretty scary. But I'm just saying that as a larger example of the new Muslim doesn't know necessarily what's going on, and having that orientation is really helpful, because you don't want to create bad experiences, and that becomes associated with, oh man, Ramadan's the time. And many new, and even ones who are not just new Muslims, but they're converts, they've been Muslim for a while, but they don't necessarily have their family are Muslims. So I hear this a lot from many new Muslims and converts, that sometimes Ramadan is very lonely, and they don't have, it's very, isolating for them, because everyone else is going for iftars with their family or extended family, and they don't have anyone to be with, and so it can be a rough time. So I think my suggestion would be just to try to engage as much as you can with these people. They don't have to learn everything but it helps if you have a coach or somebody next to you who can kind of, you can kind of mirror them during the Ramadan experience.
You said it was the three things about the Hadith of Jibreel.
Yeah.
Islam, Iman, Ihsan, and what was the fourth thing?
Oh no, there's three. It was Iman, Islam, and Ihsan.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
Another thing you were saying is Sahabas were very shy in front of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask him certain things, right?
Yeah.
But it was not because he would get angry with them. What was the reason why they were shy?
Yeah, it's a good question. So why were the Sahaba so shy in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Part of it is if you read the shama'il of the descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a certain presence of him. So normally, he could be very intimidating. He's the messenger of God. And there's something about him that could strike you right away, and you would be in awe. And most people, when they would meet him, they would be very intimidated initially. They'd be awestruck, like, wow, like they don't know how to interact with that person. Then when they got to know him, inevitably they would love him, So then there would be like the soft side, and they don't want to I don't want to, trouble you, ya Rasulullah, that kind of thing. I think it was a level of respect. SubhanAllah, someone just fell. Are they okay?
Was it sudden when you saw it?
He just fell right down. I know he got slipped, just a slip. Not a. Although. Bismillah. Are they okay? Alhamdulillah. So that happens. I think it was a mixture of intimidation, not because he was scary, but just his presence alone really affected you. He's like pure light. No shadow. So it's very difficult to interact with someone, I think, And also then you want to be respectful. You love this person so much, you don't even want to trouble them in any way. So they would have that. But they would still make questions. Of course they would. That's how we learn about the deen. It's not they didn't say anything. It was just hard for them. And if it was a really strange question or very embarrassing, that was hard. They would rather someone else say that, and they would then, enjoy the answer, without having to speak up.
But he wouldn't get angry at them for that, though?
No, he was not angry in that sense. So even if you said the most weirdest, rough question to him, he would not have that response, mashallah. He knew that it was coming from a good place, and that, there are many times, even people that were, let's just say a normal question, but there were people full on abusing him, and being very rough with him, and he still would be very merciful with them. So it just wasn't in his nature in that he would have that kind of anger towards someone who's actually seeking the knowledge. Yeah. Question? Oh, sorry, the sister. Question?
So you mentioned being mindful
Mm-hmm.
of how you want to fulfill your identity. Because identity can be defined in so many ways. You want to fulfill your Muslim, but also you want to make sure how you are aware of how you're being perceived in different contexts in a non-Muslim world, where country. So can you give us an example or a case study where you have seen somebody forming an identity, probably has gone through a few iterations of changing themselves, if possible?
I didn't fully get all of your question, but let me see if you're basically how do you go forward being mindful of who you are in this society maybe as a minority, and is that what you mean? How we kind of perceive, or how the rest of society is perceiving us?
And also the process of going back and then changing a bit.
Right, okay, yes. So updating and honing your identity as a believer is an ongoing thing. And most of the time, we have to have a healthy sense of
our own inadequacies, that we have to, the first thing is you start with your own shortcomings, and you turn it towards Allah. And then you try to, bit by bit, kind of approximate righteous behavior. So, and this is what our scholars would always tell us, that, al-hilmu bit-tahallum, you will get forbearance if you closely approximate it and get closer and closer. So initially, let's say I really want, khushu' in my prayer. But some of these people who are so righteous and they're like awliya, they seem to have it right away. And what do I do? So the advice is then you should try to emulate it. You will not be there right away, but at least emulate it. And with each time, you're going to get a little bit approximately closer, and a little bit closer, and a little bit closer. So this is always our approach. If you're sitting there and there's du'as going and everybody's thinking about in the taraweeh and people are crying and you're not crying, and you're saying, why am I not crying? Well, everyone else is crying. Then you can try to cry, it's okay. And because your goal is to get to a certain behavior and a response that mirrors the awliya and the salihin and the righteous people, that we're trying to mimic them, basically. And initially, it will be a mimicking. We can be honest about it. We will not be completely able to embody it right away. But if you get a little bit closer and a little bit closer, you will start tasting it and having little moments of it. It won't be constant, but you'll have little moments and glimpses of it. And as you get more involved in it, you will be more, it'll become more authentic to who you are. So initially, it may not feel authentic, And that's okay. You can still acknowledge that and turn to Allah to remember about your shortcomings and keep constituting Allah to be that better person that we want to be. And then you'll start to see that in other things as well, like your behavior, how you interact with people in society, all of these things. Like, we're not supposed to be angry people, We're supposed to be forbearant people, like the Prophet ﷺ. But sometimes we lose our temper, and that's okay. We can turn to Allah and ask for forgiveness. But then hopefully the next time you try to just rein it in a little bit. You try to constrict that a little bit, so that each time it gets easier and easier. And eventually you get to a state where you can behave like the believer you want to be, or at least close, to what you want to be. And this is a long life journey, of course. It's not, and some people have certain personality traits. It's easier to do some things, but not others. You'll find some people have a certain strength. They can do it easier. For me, it might be harder. It's okay. Each person is unique, and we don't have to all be in the same progression at the same time in every step. So that's another thing to consider, that it's a unique journey for every single one of us. But that's a great way to look at it. That we're not where we want to be, but we know that we're trying to progress. And the main thing is, in the very end, is your intention. Because the intention is one of the first things you can start with. Even if you can't, let's say you can't even implement it. I want to have this certain character. I want a certain high akhlaq. I want to have a way that I can interact with people, but I don't. But at least I have the intention. So maybe Allah will reward you at some point just for your intention. But you don't have the circumstances to get to that thing yet. Or with the truthfulness in your intention, other opportunities will open and you will be able to develop. But you have to have that good opinion, husnul dhan billah, that Allah has a plan for you. Don't cancel yourself right away and lose that hope. That's another way of actually disbelieving Allah, which is Allah is the most merciful, and all of that hope we can extract it from Him. There's another question here, or yeah.
Ask you one question. Just like sometime during the months of Ramadan, we struggle to choose what we can do in that month. As like, if I spend my time in reading Quran, or spend my time in zikr, or someone will focus on, I want to finish the whole Quran. So, which is better, finish the whole Quran, or I just reflect in the Quran, live with the Quran?
That's a good question. What do we do to prioritize during Ramadan? And some people have a goal. I want to complete the khatam in Ramadan, and that's a very praiseworthy goal. Actually, our scholars would always recommend that. If the general person, a Muslim, should try to do the khatam in Ramadan. And some of our teachers say that Ramadan is a special time too. Ramadan is a special time. You get multiple rewards for those types of ibadah. So even if normally during the year it might be better to just focus on the reflection and the meanings, within Ramadan, because of it's an intense moment and there's a lot of barakah, it may be better to just focus on try to get as much as you can, from it. But at the same time, I think every person should do things that are appropriate to their personality and what they're doing and what they're interested in. The most important thing is that you try to engage in something, and ideally you should have a gradually thing. So at the beginning of Ramadan you're here, and towards the end you're here. That should be the way you're looking at it. That I shouldn't just be in the same. I should be in the same spiritual state that I was at the very beginning. That you would feel kind of like, you know, a little bit, it's a little bit of a letdown. You would want to there be some incline. It doesn't have to be very steep, but some incline, so that by the end of Ramadan you see like, I went through something. I went through the school of Ramadan. Yeah, I mean,
the connection is like,
yeah,
I read it as a machine.
that's true. You don't want it to be like just completely mindless about it. You need to have a mindfulness during it and intention, but you can always recheck your intention, restart your intention every night, you know, and you know, you can be very specific about that. I mean, in the madhab Imam Shafi'i, you have to make an intention every night for the next day's Sawm, nawayt as-Sawm. Every night you have to say it, you know, and if you don't, technically some of the scholars will say you missed that day. Let's say you wake up and you didn't make that intention before the Fajr starts, you know, then you missed it. You have to remake that fast. Now, it's a very, obviously, it's a strict ruling. The Imam Malik says there's one niyyah for the entire Ramadan, and that will cover you. But, there's so many things in Ramadan that we could do, and we could just make it mechanical, just automatic. But we should pause and think about the intention every time. So, you know, and literally after, you know, in Dar al-Mustafa, right after our shuyukh, when they make the taslim, assalamu alaikum, of Maghrib, meaning, you know, we finish, and now we're in the next night. Right away, nawayt as-Sawm, and everybody says it. They do remind each other, make the niyyah for fasting tomorrow. And meaning not just the fast, but all the Ramadan behaviors. I'm going to renew it in my mind. I'm not going to just make it automatic every night. No, I want to, as if I'm starting from the fresh. Here's a new day. This is my goal. This is my reason I'm doing it. So you try to make it connected to your intention. And again, you don't want to burn out, but you need to be, you know, methodic and ideally regular with it, you know, so that you get this gradual slope during Ramadan to improve. And then you can go back for the rest of the year and talk about the meaning. Like, now I have some time in the year. By the next time around Ramadan, I should have like more meanings of these themes in the Quran. And we ponder it during the whole year. We can do that as well. So you're better equipped for the next Ramadan, and so forth.
Are you finished with that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to ask is, Hanafi, do you have to make that intention every night, or is it once for the?
Oh, I don't know. I only know the Shafi'i and the Maliki opinion. I don't know that with the Hanafi. Sorry.
Even that opinion that you have to do it
Every night, yeah.
Does that mean you can do it technically after Maghrib?
Right after Maghrib, because that means you're in the next day. And Islamically, after the sun sets, we're started the next day, the next night and day, right? So like Sunday, inshallah, you know, Sunday night, we're going to start praying Taraweeh, even though we haven't fasted yet, because the next day will be the first day of Ramadan. But in our tradition, that starts from sunset, you know, the day before. So yeah, right away you can make that intention.
But there's too many opinions of these different schools. So for new Muslims, if I get him to this point and he misses something or something, he's gonna feel guilty. I missed something.
Just give him the Maliki opinion. Say, make one intention for Ramadan.
The whole Ramadan.
Yeah, say make it for the whole Ramadan. And
If I'm gonna put it for some people like not Muslims all their life, and I give them that instruction, and oh my God, you know, I forget to make my intention. He is gonna be guilty every day.
yeah,
But when I make my intention in the beginning, so inshallah maybe this will cover it.
Yeah.
We have different cups soon.
Yes, of course. And I think initially, if you're learning the deen, you should, take the most, widespread, covering intention, so that you can still not worry about these things. But these are discussions that happen later with people that get into talab al-ilm and they get into higher levels, and then they may prefer a certain madhab to stick to, and then you would have to delve deeper, right? But if this is your initial start and you're just learning things, I think, of course, take the most general way to make sure that you're covered, and then and proceed with that.
So the new Muslims, I don't think it's a question, I think maybe it's a comment. If they were to engage in suhoor or any kind of breakfast with the intention of wanting to not be hungry for the next day because they know they're fasting, they don't have to really worry too much about missing that day as a fast for Ramadan, because that is their intention, even though it's not directly said, if that was going to provide some solace for them. I remember reading that, I think.
وإياكم إن شاء الله. جزاك الله خير. No, of course. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the intention is in the heart, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be verbalized too, but it's just the verbalizing helps with the memory of it. But of course, it's what's in the heart, and that should be emphasized to anyone who's, learning and إنما الأعمال بالنيات, all of our deeds are but by intention. All right. Well, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all for your participation, and it's my honor to be with you. I ask Allah to allow us to have barakah in the Sha'ban, and let us get to Ramadan and accept from that Ramadan from all of us. May Allah forgive us and forgive all of those that have passed away before. We ask Allah to allow us to be amongst those that be raised up on the Day of Judgment with our beloved Prophet Muhammad and all of the righteous people in our ummah and all previous ummahs. We ask Allah to allow us to enter the paradise without any hisab, without any accounting to us, and that we can be in the garden with those we love. Ameen. Al-Fatih. تقبل الله وإياكم وأن الله يتقبل الدعاء والعبادة والصوم والقراءة وأن الله يغفر الله وإياكم وإلى أرواح ساداتنا سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله وسيدنا فاطمة الزهراء سيدنا علي بن أبي طالب وسيدنا الحسن وسيدنا الحسين وإلى أرواح أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين وأهل بيت المطهرين وإلى أرواح والدينا ووالديكم وأمواتنا وأمواتكم وأموات المسلمين أن الله يتغشاهم من المغفرة ويفرج عنا والمسلمين ويختم لنا ولكم بالحسنى في خير ولطف وعافية ولحضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله. الفاتحة. آمين آمين. السلام.
You're leaving tomorrow?
Tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wonderful.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. That's good.